Okay, it's 4:05 on the
There you
dot.
go.
So we are going to get started. So welcome to our Biogen Community Lab speaker series. I'm Alex from the Biogen Community Lab. I also have my colleague Connor from the Community Lab is in the panelists, and Steph, who is from Lemelson-MIT, who co-sponsored this event with us. So first of all, we just want to welcome you. In case you're not familiar with the Community Lab, we're a lab here at Biogen. So there's a community lab in both our Cambridge, Massachusetts site and our RTP, North Carolina site. We've been open since 2002. We have seen about 55,000 students in that time. So our mission is really to engage with students and to inspire a love of science. Normally, we do that through events and programs in our physical lab. I'm sure that all of you have been affected by this pandemic, and we have as well. So we've really transitioned to trying to do more virtual things and still, trying to connect with our communities, even though we can't physically be together. So this is one of the ways that we're doing that. We'll be hosting the speaker series the third Wednesday of every month from this time, 4 to 5. So we hope that you can join us in December and beyond, but we really thank you for joining us today. I have the pleasure to introduce today's speaker to you. So today we have Juan Torres. Juan is the Chief Quality Officer here at Biogen. So he is based in RTP at our RTP North Carolina site. He actually just told me that he is at the beach right now, so we're all very jealous of him. But we want to give a warm welcome to Juan. He's going to speak to us today about innovation and science and what that means. And so I'm really excited to hear from him. If you do have questions during his talk, you can put those in the chat. We'll have a question and answer session at the end where I can read off your questions to him. But just make sure you put those in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment, and I'm going to grab Juan's slides. And then Juan, if you want to take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit with all of you. I've been with Biogen for the last 16 years. I've been responsible for quality, all what that's required in the testing and making sure our drugs meet all regulatory expectations going to the market. But one of the things that I have been during my tenure at Biogen, been a student of and very interested, is in the concept of innovation. Now, innovation in the technical field is the lifeblood, and I think that everybody would understand it. Science is all about discovery, but in a technical field, what that is all about is problem solving, and innovation it's a part of that. And one of the things that we've actually partnered with NC State in developing a curricula around innovation because of how important it is. And we've come up with a couple of insights and focus areas that if you, and this is what I want to share with you. And I'm excited about it because I have been convinced as I study this and as I think about it and gain insight, that these concepts about innovation can actually change your life. Why can I be so bold? Is because most of the time people think about the idea of innovation as something that kind of hits you, that either you're really good at something and ideas come to you, or the proverbial apple hitting your head and something comes out of it. There are two concepts that I want to talk about, though. One is that of awareness of possibilities. And awareness of possibility refers to, in general terms, to the fact that where your really great insight or innovation is going to come from is normally not where you would expect it to come. And second one is about intentionality and the idea that innovations and really blockbuster ideas do not just simply come out of the blue. You work at it, You need to prepare the field for it. You need to be intentional for it. There's actually, it is not a question of how much you know or a question of inherent ability. Anybody can come up with societal changing ideas. If you're prepared, if you're intentional, and if you maintain this kind of awareness of opportunity. And throughout the presentation, I will kind of have a couple of slides that are kind of come out of left field to talk about a few instances of examples of where that has been particularly either a good example or transformative. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so you want to have some thoughts on innovation, some key aspects, the importance of innovation and culture, which developing a culture for innovation, both as an organization and individually, is an important and key piece of what I'm talking about. Then if I have some time, we get into some case studies of innovation in pharma, in particular in Biogen, but we'll see how time goes because I do want to allow for a time of questions and answer. Next slide, please. Now, one of the things I want to say is that I don't have to overemphasize that either you as a company, in pharma in particular, either you're in a constant process of innovation, change, and renewal, or you're falling backwards. And I mean, these are examples that you have seen of companies that have seen themselves as having a corner on a specific market and being swooped by a transformative innovation or change in paradigm. And right now even with the pandemic, this is very much the case where you have companies that, like for example in the area of photography, where Kodak actually had internally developed digital photography, set it aside because they never thought that it was going to be something of relevance or importance. I remember the quote, which is the turning of the century of a magnate in the radio industry, when the concept of TV came over, and he told his board, I can never see the time where people, or a significant number of people, are going to be staring at a box for more than 5 minutes. So it gives you a little perspective on that. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, if you just go through. So when we're talking about innovation, it's important that we center ourselves on what is it that we're talking about. So innovation is an insight that inspires change and creates value. And this is an important definition because you cannot unlink the idea of having something that is kind of novel and new without the idea that it has to create a value. If you can, Alex, if you can just go through the animation on this one. It is a process, not an end result. And like I indicated earlier, it requires preparation for it. It's in an opportunity, in to recognize the opportunity. So how do we get it? How do we find innovation? How do we appropriate innovation? And these are important aspects of the kinds of cultural imperatives that we have to develop both personally, but as an organization as well. That is being open-minded, to encouraging diversity. That's why diversity is such an important piece of a growing and transformative and paradigm shifting organization. There needs to be trust because there needs to be opportunity for failure. Failure is an important piece of ideation of innovation. There need to be an opportunity that's the only way to learn, through experimentation, through trying things out, learning what worked well, what didn't work well, and then going at it again. And that's why it's so important to ensure that Every mistake is looked as an opportunity to learn, not something to be penalized. Next slide. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize with you is that innovation is not an end to itself. To have something that you want to necessarily accomplish, to bring a recognition or a quantification of something. It is not the end to itself. It's a process, and it is something that you have to kind of be living in it itself. Next slide, please. Innovators are intense observers, and that goes part and parcel with this kind of awareness that I'm talking about. It's looking at not what you're doing only, but what you're doing translates in terms of what possibilities there are. So when you have an innovator, you're going to have somebody that's very inquisitive. They're going to be asking a lot of questions. The people that I love most, and I encourage you to be this way in industry, if you choose to go in the industry, is to immediately be asking, why is this done this way? Why is it not in a different way? And the people that start in industry with that kind of mindset, it's a mark. It's definitely something that positions you for progress and for success. They're comfortable thinking differently and looking at different and how apparently different concepts or ideas can associate with each other. They're great at networking because they're always asking questions and wanting to know how things are and why things are. Then they are naturally good at forming networks, and then they obviously love and to try things out, to take things apart, to look at things just for the heck of it and see if something sticks to the wall, so to speak. Next slide, please. Let me talk first about one of these examples that I was talking about, and let me talk to you about the microwave and Percy Spencer. Percy Spencer was an engineer that was first of all, I know we all know the societally changing power that and breakthrough that the microwave has had. But when Percy Spencer, as an engineer, he was working as with Raytheon company on a government army contract back then for looking at the development and the improvement of satellites. And his wife always used to put, before he went to work, a candy bar in his pocket for a snack. When he started working with a particular piece of equipment that contained a cyclotron, that was a piece of an instrument, again, that they were using to develop better satellites, he noticed that that candy bar melted every time, made a mess in his jack pocket. And he associated, okay, the waves, the microwaves coming out from the cyclotron in his device to the change in temperature in his candy bar. And he thought, gee, not as an annoyance, but if this is happening and my candy bar is melting, what could this do to a turkey? So you're talking about something completely different. And he decided that this would be kind of neat to develop into an oven for preparation of food. I mean, what a leap of in what he was doing between what he observed and then the ultimate idea and innovation that he came up with. Now that is kind of always found it neat. But what I find actually more remarkable, now put yourself in his place. The courage that must have required for him to go to the board at Raytheon, who was working for the government on an army project, probably getting a lot of money for what they're doing, to convince them to say, listen, guys, I know we want to improve on radio satellites, but I've got this idea on how we can really move along the Thanksgiving turkey. I mean, that took guts. I have to say, that took guts, that took conviction, that took passion in terms of a brand new idea coming out of left field. And that tells you a lot about what a successful innovator, how he thinks, how he's ready, and how he's ready to stand behind an idea without knowing all the details, all the ins and outs, how this is going to work. But the kernel of the concept is so well defined in his or her mind that he can push it along in that way. Next slide, please, Alex. Now, there are a number of things about innovation that when you're in a scientific field, in the pharma or any other scientific field for that matter, are really important to understand. Our ability to innovate is absolutely vital to sustain success. And in the pharma industry, to the lives of the patients who we touch. And again, without new ideas, it's not just simply a matter of reaching new therapeutic areas or impact. It's the modalities of how we apply medicines that needs to be changing and evolving. Not that long ago, monoclonal antibodies, which Biogen is very well known for, was innovative. That was completely different from the small molecules, the classical drugs that were the mainstay of the industry back then. Today, monoclonal antibodies are no longer innovative. Now we're talking about oligonucleotides, gene therapies, completely different models upon which to bring health improvement that are completely revolutionizing. Now, we're not talking about treatments. Now we're talking about cures today. And that's the kind of change that can only come through sustained, continuous innovation, because innovations build upon each other. Actually, one of the things I've been advocating at Biogen is that executive success should be measured against the ability to be innovative and to drive innovations within their organizations. I had spoken earlier that in order to be successful in innovations, you have to create a culture of innovation. And that culture involves experimentation and involves the forgiveness of failure, actually the encouragement of failure in a sense, because you're trying new things. And that is something that sometimes, at times, is counterintuitive to corporate, culture. And you have to be vigilant and work towards that. Can you, go to the next? Sorry, it's odd not being in control of the slides. We should ask our employees to measure how we're doing to foster innovation, and that there needs to be a two-way communication. One, in how management is endorsing innovation, but also from the employees, and measuring and seeing how that is how well that's working. And ultimately, it needs to be built into our leadership competency models. And we spend a lot of time in developing leadership curricula and development programs and innovation. And we have at Biogen been very diligent in ensuring that innovation is an integral part of our leadership development as new leaders come in and get developed and develop through different steps in their careers. We also have made sure that there is increasing learning and opportunity to be involved in areas of innovation. Speaks again to the intentionality that is required for lively innovation. Next slide, please. Some critical aspects of innovation that I want to, highlight is that, again, since innovation is not something that just is happenstance or just happened by mistake, by chance, but it is something that you have to be focused and intentional about. We have been developing processes to ensure that ideas not only are recognized, but that they are sustainable, that they survive the process of implementation and execution. You need reality checks with people impacted by the change. Sometimes ideas are not practical. Sometimes ideas do not bring about the impact that you anticipate. And you need to check along the way, is my intention actually delivering the benefit that I set out? So that's why having a sandbox to test things out without the full implementation of the funding required or the impact should something not go well is so important. And finding ways to develop such sandboxes is very important. We need to emphasize, you have maintain emphasis on the process of implementation and not necessarily on the timeline for implementation. This is easier said than done because especially in a corporate environment, not in a university environment, timelines for implementations are important. But the process for implementation ultimately is much more important. It's much more important to end up with a new process, a new idea, a new workflow that brings about maximum benefit late. That's something that is half baked early. And you have to be prepared to make adjustments along the way, manage expectations, and ensure, like any change management process, any process that requires implementation of change, communication is at the end of the day the most critical aspects of change management. Next slide, please. So this is another one of those examples that I wanted to bring up with Willem Röntgen, who was doing some experimentations with cathode rays, looking at trying to get a paper on how these rays, on the physics of these rays. But he noticed some shadows that were being projected onto a film that he happened to have in line with some objects. And in seeing that shadow, he recognized the potential of these X-rays to actually be able to look at the interior of surfaces. And he put these ideas together. Actually, interestingly, this is one of the very first X-rays that there are on record, and it happens to be the hand of Röntgen's wife, and that's her wedding ring. I can only imagine what a great guy where he got this insight, and instead of using his hand, said, "Honey, do you have a moment? Can you come here and place your hand right here?" But nevertheless, that aside, this is a great another example of what I'm talking about in terms of awareness of opportunity. You looking at developing discoveries in one area, but through awareness, being able to cement the relational outcomes to a completely new idea that ends up becoming a revolutionary, in this case, part of our health industry. Next slide, please. This is another really great example to me. It's always been a great example of problem solving a complete in how looking at things in terms of what do you have, what do you need, and what can you come up with in where the resources are not there and the obstacles seem unsurmountable. Now, in many areas of the world, having children having light to do their homework at night is a great problem because of the lack of infrastructure and electricity. These two young women in the electrical engineering department, I believe I forget, it was Texas A&M, looked at this issue and thought, well, what do uh, children in many of these areas do all the time? Well, they're always either kicking a soccer ball around or making a soccer ball and kicking it around. So they worked a device that was built into soccer balls that as the kids played throughout the day with that ball, built up an internal charge that could be connected to an LED light that would have actually hours of power throughout the night for them. And they're providing these to many communities around the world where this need is prevalent. What an impact that is making. This is a seemingly simple idea, but practical, implementable, and again, building things that are seemingly incongruent into integrated ideas to bring about a benefit. The next slide, please. So, one of the things I wanted to mention is in the pharma industry. Pharma is obviously is a highly regulated environment. You have many health authorities that provide oversight for how we do things in order to ensure the quality of our products, the safety of our products, the identity of our products, and change is itself is regulated. So we we have an interesting situation where our change and the regulations we have to be working under are in a sense is something that we have to keep in mind. We have to navigate. But innovation actually, even here, is an differentiating factor for quality. We've always maintained there's ample environment to innovate within the the framework that we have to work for, and it's a differentiator because one thing is to have this this requirement for how we ensure the quality of our product. But how you go about doing that and maintaining that assurance, there's plenty of opportunities for innovating, from how you test it, for how you how even documentation. There's been ample opportunities for how that is generated, stored, accessed. The real um, the real currency in the pharma industry is data. Data is what we generate. Data is what we rely upon. Data is what we store, access, and what we use as raw material. And as we have continuously being able to generate more and more data, and that's only going exponentially, innovating in how we access that data, how we manage it, how we learn from it, is becoming an there's ample opportunity for making a difference in that area. Next slide, please. So among the drivers for innovation in the pharma industries is how do we make change and how do we change our systems, our workflows, our way of working to manage an ever increasing in complexity in our supply chains, complexity in the types of drugs we manufacture. When I started at Biogen, we had two drugs, and they were both monoclonal antibodies. Today, we have almost 20 different drugs and many different other therapeutic needs. And we make monoclonal antibodies, we make oligonucleotides, we make small molecules, we are been making gene therapy products. So that's a lot of different modalities, complexities that require specific approaches for manufacturing, for product testing, for product release. That's a lot of complexity, and that leaves a lot of opportunity for innovating how to manage that complexity, how to manage the risk associated with that, with all that production. How do we adjust to risk and to the anticipated, to what's in order to ensure that our supply of drug is maintained and it's not interrupted. And that calls for flexibility to adjust to needs. I mean, so many times we in my tenure at Biogen, we've seen drugs that we expected would only be needed for a certain number of patients, to find out through clinical studies that the impact of the drug is it's greater than we anticipated, and now we have to supply it to hundreds of thousands of patients. Or the way we found ourselves now, where the drug that we have in clinical studies for Alzheimer's disease may be needed to access millions of patients. That requires flexibility. And the other thing is, as you expand and we make our drugs available throughout the world, how do we adjust to global requirements? We not only have to meet the expectations of an FDA, but we have to meet the expectations of the European Medicines Agency, the Japanese compendia, requirements in Brazil, requirements in Canada. You have differentiation that is incredibly greater and greater as we expand our global footprint. And being able within the pharma industry to adjust and meet those expectations at least plenty of opportunity for innovation, for how to do it better, how to do it differently, and how to adjust. It's essential for our sustainability for the future. Next slide, please. So I've been kind of touching on this, and the fact is that innovation and efficiency can live very comfortably alongside a direction towards what I call sustainable compliance. Compliance is the descriptor for being able to meet all the expectations of all these health authorities around the world, which may seem constricting, but you can innovate because thinkers will exploit opposing ideas and construct a third, better solution. The best outcome is not when you have an A or a B, you either go left or right, and you find yourself in the conundrum. Do I go with option A or option B? Choosing the best of those two options is obviously a good thing, but being able to come up with an option C that is a win-win situation where you win from both things is actually the best possible outcome. And the fact is, as we look at brand new, earth-shaking changes in how we do compliant manufacturing in the pharmaceutical industry, what we're recognizing is that we're coming up with actually better ways of ensuring the quality of our products than in the orthodox standard ways of doing things. Let me use as an example. The classic approach to providing the decision of whether a batch is good and meets expectations is to take the final product and make it go through a battery of tests that are standard, that are validated, and if they pass those tests, you conclude the batch is good. Now think of a completely different outcome that is being enabled by the technological advances in analytics, where you're monitoring the process in real time, constantly. You're not doing 1 or 2 or 15 determinations. You're monitoring the process streams with probes that give you an indication of the quality attributes like potency or purity, any of these. And when your batch is finalized, you already know that that batch meets the expectations. You don't need to stop and test it. You've already determined that, not at discrete points in the process, but throughout, continuously. Now you have something that is much more efficient. The drug makes it to the patient much faster, and you have actually a better oversight of the quality and any issues that may have come up during manufacturing. So that's how these two seemingly opposing trends or expectations can live comfortably along each other. Next slide, please. Now, that's just funny. I used to just because, you know, when you're thinking in a compliant environment, you're trying to think that, you know, the caption says, I'll be happy to give you innovative thinking. What are the guidelines? The fact is, there are no guidelines. When you're talking about innovative thinking, there's going to be a level of discomfort, and there's going to be a level of somebody saying, but that's not going to work. That is not going to be acceptable. That is not going to be implementable. And you have to get past that initial gap. It's in some in in the innovation field, they refer to this as the valley of death. It's between the idea between going between the ideation to the implementation. There's a big valley of death where the idea can die if the advocacy for this idea is not sustained or maintained. Next slide, please. So what is less clear is how to describe what is meant to innovate. What does innovation really mean to us? And I've been kind of alluding to this during the last few minutes. If indeed we reach a definition that is common and we all accept it, how do we share it? How do we look at it the same way? Again, speaks to the development of culture. How to most effectively and efficiently build the capacity to innovate. What are the skills that we need to develop within our employee base? And the idea is that these can be taught. It's not something that is innate to people. The ability to innovate, the ability to be a great innovator can be acquired, can be learned, can be developed further. And we need to reinforce it continuously. It's something that is not a once and done deal, but it is something that is essential to continue to promote, share, and reinforce. Next slide, please. This is another, I thought, a great example of something that was seemingly came out of nowhere. This company had came up with a product that was used to remove wallpaper. And the type of wallpaper, it was at the time when this product was made, people used a lot of charcoal for heating homes, and the charcoal was coated the wallpaper in homes, and they came up with a product that was very good at removing wallpaper soot from in dirt. But of course, as people switch from charcoal to other kinds of heating homes, this came into disuse, and this company was almost going belly up when one of the owners of the company needed to make a project for his daughter, for school, for art, and happened to have some of the materials that they use for this wallpaper wash and removal, and informing made some kind of animal with it, had the idea, wow, this could be something that would be great as a toy or for school. And then they eventually came up with the name of Play-Doh. I don't have time now, but it's really interesting to see how they came up with some really weird names before they came up with Play-Doh, which is now obviously a household name, and it made an impact, and it's something that became as part of our our cultural heritage to have as a product. Another great example of awareness of opportunity. Next slide, please. So question to consider on culture is, does our organization have a shared definition and understanding of what it means to innovate? And if we don't, we need to create one. Can we identify and have general agreement on where the innovation challenges reside in our culture? What keeps us from innovating? What are the things that are detrimental to accepting good ideas? Why do ideas die in the vine? It is interesting to think that when you have a group of people and you're looking at a problem, uh, it it takes a whole room to come up with ideas or to have a good idea, but it only takes one person actually to kill an idea. All it takes is what one person to say, well, that'll never work. Oh, I don't think that's good, to completely bury and kill an idea. It's something that in a thriving, innovative culture does not exist. People actually not being open to consider, entertain, listen to something, even if it looks or sounds weird off the bat. How do we teach it? It's a competency that we need to foster and promote. I need to move. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I know I want to leave enough time for question. So I've been talking about innovation being intentional and being sustainable. So these are some enablers for innovation that I think are important to keep in mind. Optimal leveraging of data and information, how we access it, the facility that we have to accessing information, which actually it's becoming greater and greater as we get due to the technology itself. The change management process is an incredibly important piece of innovation management, because one of the things is to come up with an idea, an innovation, and even having the resources or the acceptance to do it. But how to manage the process to change something, specifically something that has been established for a long time, is very, very difficult. There needs to be empowerment, and that empowerment needs to be honestly and genuinely felt. We need to allow for opportunity to have different perspectives, and for there to be a healthy conflict in sharing of different points of view. And then there needs to be actually a certain degree of governance in companies, because it, it's great to have a, a plethora or a good supply of ideas, but there also has to be a process by which to look at all the possible ideas and cementing the effort, resources, focus that you do have, which for every organization is not limitless, in those that will have the greatest potential and that will be gauged between impact and ease of implementability. Next slide, please. Velcro, another one of these examples I wanted to mention. The inventor of Velcro, many of you may know this, was an inventor who went out and saw that these plants and these little burrs of seed burrs that got stuck on the fur of his dog when he went outside, and he found it very difficult to remove and very annoying to remove. But as he was doing it, he started thinking as to what make these seed pods attached to his dog's skin and hair so strongly. And as he looked and dug into seeing the fibers and how they connected with each other, he had this idea for how you could have or come up with a device or a mechanism for adhesive that would be strong, but at the same time easy to readjust or remove. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to just to leave enough room for question. I'm going to talk about how one case studies. Obviously we have many examples of normal operating principles in a pharmaceutical industry where innovation can make and has made tremendous amount of impact. One of these is in training. Training, as you can imagine, especially in a regulated industry, is critical in every aspect, from manufacturing to quality to engineering, even to marketing. Training in how to do things and how to follow operating standard operating protocols, the right way to do things, is especially when people's health and the outcomes of drug production are so critical. Training isn't important. Now, training, you can look at it in the classical way of you either reading a document or somebody showing you how to do something, and that's the way things have been done for a very, very long time in the pharma industry. And I think that new ideas are coming up that are revolutionizing how that training is done. I wanted just to share a few with you. If you go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So we have technology, but it's not just technology and what technology allows, but it is how we are integrating what technology allows into a different way of looking at it, whether it's webinars or videos, interactive coursework, simulation, even gamification. Now it's revolutionizing our training and all these technologies. Next slide. If you look at the impact also of changing the paradigm, you can see that the effectiveness increases in proportion. And when you've asked people how confident they are in dealing with a specific task through an e-module versus orthodox or normal way of doing it, they feel much more confident about performing the task that they've been trained on. Next slide, please. So, I mean, it's interesting because I made these slides some time ago in backdrop of the changes that we have to make. It's interesting that things that were tentatively used then are now kind of commonplace, like webinars, or what we're doing. How am I giving this talk to you at the moment? Next slide, which is almost ironic. And the idea that within the pharmaceutical industry, within a regulated industry, that you have to show every concept or every training in place or with somebody, that's changing completely. And the effectiveness of the evidence is just strengthening that, whether it's videos or lab procedure. It's just the way we can capture the training is it's very practical and effective and efficiency. Next slide, please. Interactive coursework, where we allow our training is in this forum where checking for knowledge and checking for understanding is integrated into the module that you're training on. It's not just a matter of being exposed to information. It's being able to interact with that information to ensure that when the employee has gone through the module, they actually have been able to understand what they're being trained on. Next slide, please. We're working on developing a set of virtual environments to train on. Now, an analyst doesn't need to train on a spectrophotometer or a physical spectrophotometer to start out with, but they can train on a virtual one. And I was talking about experimentation and trying things out. This is great. You're being able to learn in an environment that is safe, where you can make mistakes, where you can try things out, and where you don't have limitations of time or or teacher time to train. And like this instrument, we have it for whole environmental suites. Next slide. Uh, for whether it's lab safety or other types of workflows, you have a much more vibrant and flexible and with great potential mechanism for learning. I think I have a couple more slides I wanted to show. This is an important one. In the pharmaceutical industry, being able to operate well within a sterile environment is difficult. It's a difficult thing to learn and to try it out. So normally people have had to train within these sterile environments, and that makes it very difficult. Doing it in a virtual environment has opened up a lot of possibility and a much faster learning curve. Again, I can just go over. I mean, we have, we're trying to look at gamification as one way to recreate our entire manufacturing suites, to be able to interact, learn, and actually do problem solving from when things don't go well. This is just one area of the pharmaceutical industry where innovation or looking things in a fundamentally different ways can make a big difference. The same way you can look at many other areas, whether it is in the manufacturing floor, documentation, record keeping, and on and on. But anyway, I know I'm running late, and I apologize. This is something that it's a very rich topic, and I think you can tell that I've been passionate about it. But maybe I'll leave a few minutes to if there are any comments or any questions or any areas that I can talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the students probably really enjoyed listening to that case study specifically. I noticed we have a lot of students that were in our summer program, and we actually got to use a virtual lab simulation. So they got to do a lot of like what your scientists are doing with training. So they've got to see that firsthand, which is pretty exciting. We do have a couple of questions in the chat we'll go over really quick. So someone says that they are planning to study biomedical engineering. And they want to know if Biogen has biomedical engineers and biomedical researchers that are innovating.
Absolutely. I mean, especially in our Cambridge site where R&D is happening. Biomedical engineering is a great field. It's a great field for innovating, and it's a great field, in Biogen. Within Biogen, we are it's a great entry point into the pharmaceutical industry, and I could not say enough about the opportunity that somebody with that skill set has in bringing up fundamental disruptive change in the pharma industry.
Awesome. And then we have another question. Would you say there are different types of innovation? And if so, what are those different types?
I mean, at its core, innovation is looking at a problem and trying to address it and solve it in a way that is depart from how it's been looked at and brings a benefit by doing so. So to me, in that sense, there's a unifying characteristic to all of it. But of course, there's areas where you have much more either theoretical or conceptual emphasis versus one where it's more practical and it's incremental. And incremental innovation is just as valuable as having a disruptive innovation. And this is has been a misconception in my mind, where a lot of focus has been placed on the benefits and the impact of disruptive innovation, which has its place, but at the danger of considering incremental change or incremental innovation as being kind of a second tier in value and importance, and that's certainly not true.
Right, and then we have, I guess, one last question that just popped up. So someone says they're interested in biochemistry, And they're wondering what the difference is when you think about innovation in more of a research, like academia, or research in pharma or in industry.
Yeah. So again, in concept, there's not a difference, but in practice there is. In that, in academia, you're looking more at making academia is again is focused around the accumulation of understanding, and is more future focused and more and broader in concept. Whereas within industry, you have much practical implications because you're looking at solutions that will bring a benefit in a shorter amount of time, no matter what industry you're in. In pharma industry, you're looking at ideas and you're looking at change that will bring benefits to patients in the shorter term. In shorter term could be years, but still not where in academia, you're not necessarily looking at immediate translation of what you're studying into a practical application.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction that is it's kind of exciting because sometimes I think people think about industry and they think we lack innovation, but that's not true, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely not.
Right. Awesome. So we're at 5 o'clock. So we will let you go. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today and talking. This has been an incredible talk. Thinking about innovation, and especially right now, like you've said, with this pandemic, so many things are changing in our society so quick. So innovation is something that's super important. So thanks for sharing with us. Thanks to everyone who joined us. Remember, we'll also be having a seminar third Wednesday in every month for the next foreseeable few months. So hope you can join us in December. I want to thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.